Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are much like an Amish youth during Rumsfinger. We're trying to figure things out, so we're starting at noon today to see how that works for everybody. Still going to have the same great information for you. Give the opportunity to chat with us in here if you have any questions. The first thing we're going to talk about though is the draft. Now we've had 11 players drafted in what we're calling the modern era. And for those that don't understand, we throw these terms around all the time, the modern era. In 1994, they changed it to 7 rounds. Obviously, prior to that, each team was divided into a fiefdom, and the GM and the coach had to search the region for able-bodied men to play the game. Now it's a lot more organized. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, Paul, as we're moving forward, because we've wrapped this up. You've written 2 great articles on InsideTexas.com. And if you could just give us maybe a 30,000-foot view on your impressions of the draft and how that went for Texas. I mean, it was a big year for Texas.
Yeah, if I do it from 30,000 feet, you're not going to be able to hear me.
That's a fair point.
So I'll do it from here in front of my computer. I'm about 1.5 feet over it. So I think that'll help the sound quality. I'm not a producer, so we're all just grappling through this together. So the 2024 NFL draft saw 11 Longhorns selected, as LC mentioned. It's the first double-digit performance in the modern draft era, as he defined. We had 5 go in the first 52. So this wasn't a bunch of guys going in the 6th and 7th rounds. So it's arguably the best performance ever. And here's why. Famously, there were in the 1984 Longhorn draft class, that was the 1983 team that just missed a national championship by a fumbled punt. They had 17 guys drafted. And that broke a 38-year record that Notre Dame had held since 1946. But 7 of those picks happened after round 7. So you could argue on sort of a pound-for-pound basis, this might be the greatest Longhorn draft class ever. And so I thought that was very interesting. Another kind of big picture observation, the SEC won its 18th consecutive year with 59 drafted. That's not including, obviously, Texas and Oklahoma. That gap is only going to grow when Texas and OU are added. And, of course, the Big Ten will pad their own when they add the 4 schools from the pack. And the part of my second article that I wrote on Inside Texas, and I'd encourage you all to join and go read it, is that the acceleration, people who talk about the P4, it's actually not the proper way to talk about current college football. It's the Elite 2. It's the SEC and Big Ten. Then there's 2 other 2, which are the non-Elite 2. And then you've got the G5, FCS, Division 2, et cetera. And interestingly, the trend lines that are creating gaps between these conferences are actually accelerating. They're not plateauing. And it's not just a function of realignment. It's also a function of the direction of how the portal flows. It's a function of the fact that the ACC, the 2 teams that contributed 37% of their total draft are fighting to get out of the league on a per capita basis. If you readjust for the new alignment in 2024, the SEC averages 4.5 athletes drafted per school, right? The Big 12 realigned will average 1.6. So these are different leagues, and you can call them P4, but I don't think that adequately describes the disparity in talent. And I think that disparity is probably only going to grow. So I'll have some more nuggets for everyone, and you can read all of it if you join Inside Texas. But I'll throw it to the rest of you gentlemen to opine on what you saw or didn't see on drafting.
I kind of want to speak to the growing disparity real quick, because I wrote an article on my Substack, America's War Game today, where I noted that all the playoff champions these days have draft numbers comparable to 2001 Miami. Like, that level of talent used to be really special, and everybody was like, Miami Hurricanes, the greatest team of all time. We've never seen this much NFL talent on a team before. Now it's like every playoff team has that amount of talent. And I think that the expanded playoff might make that even greater, because you can go to a school like a Georgia or an Alabama or a Texas, and you can get on the field in primetime slots against other future NFL talent. And the fact that you didn't play as much may not matter, right? You can be a backup or a role player and still have a chance to be drafted, kind of like being like on one of those Kentucky teams, right? Where it's like Devin Booker averages 9 points a game on this like loaded Kentucky team for Calipari and goes like in the second round of the tournament and then he's done, but then he still gets drafted and has this huge career. We could see an effect like that in football and just further exacerbation of the same underlying phenomenon of the Pareto accumulation of talent in the big two leagues.
Well, very quickly, Ian, you're a guy who's created a lot of expertise around the Big 12 schematic advantages, right? The Big 12 was able to hang. This has been going on for a while, but it's now more pronounced. The Big 12 was able to hang because, frankly, they were more advanced in terms of their concepts. They were more adventurous. They tried different things. And that advantage has gone away. The new Big 12 is actually more conventional. The SEC and the Big 10 now have all the coaches who are out there and who are pushing the parameters. In fact, I mean, and the crazy thing here is the Pac-12, as evidenced by this draft, was the second strongest league. And that was also evidenced by regular season play, not just the top teams, but their depth. I mean, the number 6 team in the Pac-12 was a good football team. And that hasn't happened for that league in decades. So just in time for them to die from administrative manslaughter, they put together their best accumulation of talent and their best accumulation of coaches that they've had, right? Dan Lanning, Whittingham, Riley at USC, Jed Fish at Arizona. I mean, and all those coaches are now, they've gone to the Big Ten. Sorry?
Never mind.
What did you say, Jeff?
With Pac-12 schools, I was going to give Dion some love.
You subversive son of a gun.
Yes,
yes.
is just naming things in the room. Did you say
he just looked at a poster of Dion that he had. He's like, Dion,
okay.
Hey Dion,
I love Lamb,
brother. Listen, I just everything is pointing in one direction, and I hate to be that guy, and I don't even know how I feel about it. I mean, Texas is in the cool kids table. It's fine. I mean, I'm glad we are. But I don't know if this is good for college football long term. I'm just describing reality as it is, and sort of how I feel about it doesn't matter, right? Braveheart, Uncle Argyle goes to pick up William after William's older brother and father are murdered in war, and William says, "I don't want to go." And Uncle Argyle says, "You didn't want your dad and older brother to die either, but it happened. We'll leave tomorrow." And that's kind of how I feel about the state of college football. I'm just glad we're at the cool kids table.
Moving on from the inciting incident of Braveheart, Brett Nelson has a question, and this is to do with coaching. I mean, look, and I want to thank Brett. Brett is a massive, not only contributor in terms of the super chats, which is really, really helpful. So thank you, Brett, but also he's bringing really good questions. If you want your question to be answered 100% for sure, go ahead and throw that in the super chat. But here's the overarching thing. And the thing that I love about what Brett is asking here is the subtext. This is a very University of Texas fan question to ask. We're doing really well. Things are going great. Could our future portend some sort of misery? And what he's asking here is, do we think that Sark could leave for the NFL if he were to win a natty in the next 3 years? I'm going to throw this actually over to Justin. We haven't heard your dulcet tones today. So let's hear a little bit about this. What do you think about Sark's position should he win a natty in the next 3 years?
I mean, the NFL is going to come after him. So just prepare for that. Chris Del Conte will prepare for that. The powers that be will be prepared. But here's the thing. He didn't waste 2 years of his life recruiting one quarterback named Arch Manning to just bolt after a national championship to the NFL and presumably not get to use him. Like that, it doesn't work that way. Like one of Sark's, crowning moments was getting to develop and coach up this young Manning. And it just would be counterproductive to win a natty and then go, all right, guys, I'm headed to coach the LA Rams. It's like, you know what, Sark? Just by getting around him the last few years, I think he's happy. If he's not going to leave for Alabama after a great season in Texas, I don't see him leaving for the NFL without at least getting to coach up Arch Manning. Like it almost doesn't make a lot of sense. But if he wins a natty in the next few years, the NFL will beat down his door. And that's going to put Chris Del Conte and Texas fans on notice. And that's a good thing, guys. That's a very good thing. So concerned isn't the word I would use. I would say possibility, because concern is somewhat negative, and after a natty, it's all positive.
What are your thoughts on this, Ian? We're going to be able to keep him?
I don't know. I think that I mean, I'm with Justin. If you win a national championship in the next 3 years with Arch Manning and Sark, and then he goes to the NFL, many worse things have happened, and we've all watched and documented them.
Right.
Do I think that that's a very real possibility? Absolutely.
Jeff Traylor.
Would I be worried about what happens next at the University of Texas? 100%.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, honestly, this is not going to be about money.
Yeah,
it's going to be about a sense of achievement and challenge.
Yep.
Does he want to create a college football legacy where he wins multiple national titles and becomes the greatest head coach in Texas football history, surpassing DKR? Or does he feel like the ultimate challenge is the NFL? I mean, so my big dream when we were in our last coaching cycle hire, not the Sark one, but the pre-Sark one, I think it was the Charlie Strong cycle. I said my two dream guys are Harbaugh and Shanahan, young Shanahan. And Harbaugh, for various reasons, couldn't materialize. Young Shanahan, I knew a friend of a friend and reached out. And Shanahan was like, I'm an NFL coach. I am not going to go persuade a 17-year-old to go play football for me. Like he just views the highest level of the game as played at the NFL. And, some coaches view the challenges of college. The salary differential of college and NFL is no longer a thing.
Right.
It's about where do you want to live? And I don't think that's where Alabama actually is a useful comparator, Justin. Sark doesn't want to live in Tuscaloosa.
No, we know that, but they're the standard, and that's why I kind of use it.
That's not. He doesn't want to live there, dude. And so the
Neither
LA
does his
Rams,
wife.
yeah, and the LA Rams. Now that's a different animal, right?
That's back home.
That's a different
And
thing.
Sean McVay has retirement written all over his forehead.
That's it. So yeah, I think that might be the enticing thing. But as Ian said, if we win 11 to 14 games every year for the next 4 years and win a national title, and then Sark leaves, I guess we'll have to recover.
Right.
God help us.
Exactly. It's a very Texas point of view, which I really appreciate about it. Let's move over a little bit. Again, we're staying on the draft, but we're transitioning from the draft to recruiting and how this particular draft with 11 guys going in has affected recruiting. And this is your bread and butter here, Justin. So we'd love to hear from you. What are you hearing from the recruits? What is the overall sentiment, the vibe check, if you will, with these kids and how Texas has been able to develop? And that was been a knock on them for a very long time. And they've demonstrated that is no longer an issue. Obviously having 2 3-star defensive tackles go in the first round or the first 2 rounds of the draft is a major deal. What are you hearing and what are you seeing just on the recruiting trail as a result of this particular draft?
This was already kind of building up with recruits anyway, because it's been a selling point, especially for defensive linemen. If you talk to Zion Williams and Brandon Brown and Myron Charles, that's their sell. Hey, watch this weekend's draft. Watch Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and those guys go. So it's been a known, seeing it put in play. I mean, the best we can do is reach out and talk to these kids. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? We had 2 separate updates from recruits at Inside Texas in the last 24 hours, just talking about what it meant, because we use that a lot as a barometer. We talk about, vibe and culture and winning in the program and all that stuff. But the NFL draft is the one that really gets their attention. I mean, really hardcore for good reason. And so, offensive tackle Michael Fasusi, this guy's on an unofficial visit to Colorado Saturday, and he's texting me about players in the NFL draft from Texas and how impressive it is and how he knows he would get developed at Texas. Jonah Williams, 5-star safety. He's like 11. Did you say 11? He goes, I knew it was a lot. I didn't realize it was that much, but that just shows you Sark and those guys are doing a great job. Cade Phillips, the safety, also mentioned, he said, man, that's a school that you're going to go to the league. They're coming up. You've got an opportunity. Wide receiver Andrew Marsh, They had 3 wide receivers drafted. They had their number 3 receiver for the offense in 2023 was drafted in the 6th round, and Jordan Whittington. And Marsh, magnified that. Khalil Lockett from Saxe magnified that. And so it's exactly what you would think it would be to the guy that had the question. Recruits are going to take notice. They're going to take advantage. And when we get in, and what's funny is Sark's and the coaches are on the road these next 2 weeks. If you don't think this is the ammunition that they're using, think again. Like, they already had a nice little sell. We're headed to the SEC. Trajectory's up. Returning the 2nd most talent in the SEC production-wise, 25th nationally, according to Bill Connolly. We're growing. Now you can throw. Also, we just had 11 dudes picked. Like on Inside Texas didn't have as much work Saturday night because I'm used to chasing undrafted free agents all Saturday evening after every draft throughout the last 10 years. I had to chase 2, Ryan Sanborn and Jett Bush. That to me was very, very telling. And so, of course, it resonates with the recruits. We won't know that fully until we dive more into these processes and these guys start to make their decisions. Official visit season is coming up in late May. About 3 more weeks, you're going to have these guys hitting campus. Texas is hosting their biggest event in the last weekend of June. So we're going to see how much it actually affects over the next course of this next 3 or 4 months, but also for 2026. Because we're almost halfway through 2025 cycle. And so there'll be an overlap there as well. And it's not going to hurt that Texas is likely going to have 6 or 7 guys drafted next year, if not more, depending on, who develops and who produces big this year. And so it for the question, yeah, it helps. And it's going to help a little at a time, at each position at a time. It'll take a recruitment at a time. But when you start asking these guys about it, the phone, they were contacting me quickly because they're watching, they're paying attention. And to me, that's the biggest sign of all of it.
Do you know where else it makes a big difference? It's when you have maybe 7 starting caliber receivers on your roster that you'd like to stick around and not leave through the transfer portal. And you can say, hey, if you wait around and be a starter here 1 year, you're drafted, done.
This is what you were alluding to earlier, Ian. The idea that you don't necessarily have to be a 3-year starter at certain positions now. That as long as you can, look, Jay Brooks is a great example of that, right? We had a guy come in, absolutely phenomenal season, gets hurt, and is still the number 1 running back taken. It's the landscape is changing drastically. One of the major landscape changes for us at Inside Texas is now we're obviously live streaming on Twitter, and I want to thank all the folks that have checked that out for us. This is a new opportunity for us to reach out and get this information to as many folks as possible. Please check out InsideTexas.com. We're running a special right now for if you put in the promo code IT1, you're going to get 2 months of our content for $1, which is a pretty darn good deal. If you have an opportunity, go ahead and obviously follow these guys, obviously here on YouTube, and you can see their handles underneath their names. But let's go to one thing that you mentioned earlier, Justin, which was the idea of the SEC and the production that we're bringing back. I'd like to bring this over to Ian, actually. We're bringing a lot of production into this league, and this is something that you've written about. What the difference in the coaching style, the prep is going to be for going into the SEC and how we move week to week. And I'm just curious, having that level of production, what that means going into this brand new vocabulary that the coaches are going to be dealing with this new league.
It's really going to come in handy in the secondary, which I think is where a lot of that production is, encountering the SEC offenses, which are, like Paul was talking about earlier, it's really the SEC where you have to worry about the passing and the spread nowadays. It's not the Big 12. Houston and Oklahoma State or Kansas State are like minor versions of what's waiting for Texas in the SEC from Ole Miss or Tennessee or Georgia, even to some extent. So, it's going to matter a lot. It's always returning production is a very finicky thing in general. Bill Connolly used to have a really useful stat that said that pass game production, returning production was the most valuable thing to have. And then he found a way to tweak his stats to account for something else about the offensive line that wasn't like pure snaps. And then all of a sudden returning production on the offensive line by this new metric became super important as well. It's a very difficult thing to quantify. Bill Connelly does as good a job as any trying to measure it, but I don't know. It's Quinn Ewers is back. Line is back. Simple answer is it looks pretty good.
Is it as simple as that, Paul? I mean, is it as simple as like, look, we've got a very seasoned offensive line and a third-year starting quarterback. I mean, are we digging too deep, or is it just as simple as, look, we've got experience. We're going into this with a coach that knows what he's doing and a quarterback that understands what the coach wants. Is it that
this
easy?
Is a deeply complex and nuanced issue, and Ian oversimplifies it as usual. No, actually, Ian's right. Actually, calculating returning production has all been queered anyway because of the portal. So,
right,
yeah. Justin, that's the proper use of the term. You seven.
I know that, Paul. Right. I just like the way you emphasized when you said the word. You put an emphasis in the middle.
A lot of this live stream is not just for the viewer, but to entertain each other. All right. So, good point on like quarterback, your offensive line. That's very crucial. On defense, I'd argue it's your secondary is probably the most crucial return metrics. And then obviously defensive line depth, right? Do you have multiple dudes that can play? And so Texas checks a lot of those boxes. The thing that does mess it up, though, is how do you account for portal production? Are we counting as Isaiah Bond's full production at Alabama? Because in fact, at Alabama, Isaiah Bond was an inefficient receiver, relatively speaking. I think that had more to do with Jalen Milroe than Bond himself, although he had a couple of dropsies early in the season. Also, like, for example, Oklahoma has some real deficits on his offensive line. They're bringing in, they're feverishly attacking the portal to address it. They just brought in the starting safety from SMU, the starting center from SMU. How do you count his returning production playing against Tulsa, right? I mean, I just think it's not quite as easy as maybe it was even 5 years ago, just because the portal has messed it up. And how do you sort of count? How do we count Trey Moore? I mean, this incredibly esteemed player at his level. I mean, the conference player of the year on defense. How do we count his production? Do we count it at 80% for our level? Do we count it fully because he's a stud and we know historic, or at least my belief, I think, is getting proven that the FCS All-American actually pans out better than the second teamer 5-star who never broke through at Georgia. So it's difficult to look at those production numbers, but bottom line, we have a third-year quarterback. We've got a fairly intact offensive line. This ain't hard. This isn't rocket science. The offense should be pretty good and the floor should be really high.
David Keith Williams has a question here specifically for our friend Ian. And this is to do with Mr. Watts. What do you think his long-term success is going to be? Obviously, we've got he ran his 4.5, 40.5 inches on the vertical. I mean, does he have the opportunity to be one of the best safeties in the league? Obviously, and this is a good example, I think, again, for having a small collegiate sample size at a school and being able to elevate yourself up into the NHL or the NFL draft.
I mean, we don't even know if he's going to move to safety. I mean, those numbers make you wonder if he's going to stick at corner. A lot of times, the word on him at Texas was that maybe he lacked elite speed to really hang there, but you rarely saw that actually matter in games. He usually held up pretty well. And I know Washington beat him over the top a couple times, but he was usually, I believe the ones where they beat Watts, he was pretty well in phase and the ball placement just beat him, right? It wasn't like some of the other shots that they landed where the Texas corner got just kind of straight up beat. So could it be a great safety? Maybe. I don't know if that's even in the cards though. Pittsburgh, he's kind of guy that Pittsburgh would probably like to maybe leave where he is and see if that sticks out. They're all about like a big, long physical guy, rough people up. And he'll have TJ Watts and that other really good pass rusher that emerged. I can't remember his name at Pittsburgh. When you have that kind of pass rush, you can gamble and you can jam and use your length, and the recovery speed may not come into play as much. So I don't know if anybody else has any other opinions. He has a pretty muddy future to me.
I think where he's at in Pittsburgh almost ensures he's going to stay at safety. just because of Mike Tomlin and those guys' style, like you said.
At corner, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, no. I think he's going to move to safety. I think he'll make the transition. I think he can press, man, but like these little guys are going to turn and burn on him. You get a guy in motion, he's going to be by him in 2 or 3 seconds. I think he's better at the second level where he can diagnose a little bit, maybe come downhill a little bit. The beauty of it is he's a big, fast athlete and a really good guy. So he's easy to pull for, and he's a guy that he's going to get a shot. He's going to get a chance.
I would say the fallacy here is his ability to adapt to safety, if that indeed happens. It's not going to be predicated on his vertical leap.
Right.
It's going to be his ability to recognize the angles from that position and react. The NFL game happens real fast. It's not that the players are so much faster, although they are. It's that they play a lot faster too. And that's going to be the main determinant for Watson. By the way, him getting drafted by the Steelers is great news for him, because that's a great organization at those later round draft picks, and their success, their hit rate is extraordinary. And they had one of my favorite drafts. You probably noticed they got Roman Wilson late as well, which I think he's going to be a good pro for them. So I just think he ended up in a good landing spot, which is great for Ryan, because by all accounts, he's a great dude.
Brett's coming in with another question specifically for Justin here. Where do you think Mr. Williams ends up being ranked? Is he a top 50 fringe 5-star type player?
He's exactly a top 50 fringe 5-star player. It is criminal what he is rated right now. And I get it. There's always different fluctuations in different networks. And, some people look for some different traits. Others look for others. I don't know what you're missing. All I know is Texas is treating him like he's a top 5 player in the country. And that's how LSU's treating him. And that's how you're supposed to. He is 6'5", 320 with a 38-inch waist. That dude can do multiple sports at multiple times while he's in the theater. Like, this dude is multifaceted, great smile, great motor, can knock out 7,000 calories in a setting. I mean, that's just 5-star material if I don't know what it is. But honestly, if he was from Houston or from Dallas or from Louisiana, I would have the same argument. Great kid, but really the upside is through the roof. When I'd seen him a few times, told Eric about him. Eric's like, okay. Eric made a trip to Lufkin to see him just because of how special this guy is. And like I said, not knocking down the guys at On 3. I think Charles Power and Cody Belair and those guys do a great job, but it's criminal. This dude should be top 50. I think he's probably a high 4-star, to be honest with you. But top 50, top 60, just the fact that Texas and LSU have him at the very top of their board of defensive linemen in the nation, to me, that should tell you all you need to know.
Jeff G and I are in agreement that if a caloric intake were the primary metric used to evaluate stars, I think, just one sitting with margaritas and a 4,000 calorie queso dip, I think I would probably knock that out in about 20 minutes. Let's move a little bit back to the draft, specifically with our offensive line, right? It's a very deep opportunity for us. It's one of the rooms that has probably the deepest level of talent, at least at this point. So getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, obviously there are some obvious names that are going to be thrown out for next year's draft, but who do you think? I mean, what are you seeing for next year's offensive line specifically to do with the draft? We'll put this over to Paul first.
Also a classic UT comment here, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's not talk about the year coming. Let's talk about, try to project the quarterback room in 2027. Is Trey Owens going to transfer to Florida State in 2026 if KJ Lacey is showing well in the spring game? I don't know. I don't care.
Right.
I mean, we don't know who's coming back. And we also don't know who's going to portal out in the next 5 days, 6 days.
Yeah, Wednesday.
A potential starter could be portaling out. I'm not breaking news here. I'm just saying, look at the depth chart, look at the guys who are fighting for snaps, and a guy who might potentially be able to start for us that year could be playing for another football team. So yeah, I don't know. I think we know Gooseby will be a part of that line. I think, yes, we think DJ Campbell might be a part of that line, but we don't know. So, right. I mean, just projecting this is folly. I don't understand why. I mean, there's literally like 4 or 5 dudes who may not even be that we could project as a starter, who may not be on the team because of the portal, the NFL draft, off the field stuff. Who knows? So I'm more interested probably in talking about this year than 2025.
Yeah, and next year's O-line, you're losing Kelvin Banks, you're losing Jake Majors.
That's it.
Gooseby, Cole Hudson at center, or Daniel Cruz at center. There's your 2 replacements. Those other 3 spots could be up for grabs. You don't know what's going to happen with Cam Williams. DJ Campbell could have an all-conference year and decide to take off. We know he's in that mindset. I'm with Paul. Figuring out 2024's O-line and rotation, which we've got a pretty good handle on, is enough for us at the moment. But I'll say this, and I said it earlier, I was talking to one of the old recruiting guys from Texas a few years ago over the weekend, and we were looking at literally 7 or 8 guys that are going to probably get drafted in 2025. And I see Banks and Jake Majors. I got Banks going in the first round, late first round, and I got Jake Majors going in the 6th round. And so that in and of itself, you're going to lose a couple guys to the O-line, just like they did Christian Jones. Let that thing keep revolving. Let that door keep coming in. Let that pro day keep mattering, and let these guys keep heading up to Indianapolis for the combine and really showing out.
For those of you that are just joining us, I see that we've got about 1,800 people on the Twitter stream. Thank you so much for that. This is our opportunity here to answer some of your questions, and get some of your thoughts on how the season is going. Obviously, how the draft just went. We've got recruiting coming up. And obviously, what Paul was alluding to earlier, what we may know in the next few days revolves around that vital day of Wednesday. Wednesday is when the transfer portal closes by way of entering it. After that, it's entirely up to when the school starts, when you have to do your enrollment. But in order to be eligible to transfer, you need to enter that draft on Wednesday. And quite frankly, as much as we know, we have a lot of inside sources on this, and even they are a little bit uncertain in some areas about some ways kids are going to go. So it is a vital day on what is going to happen. So when you are looking at your calendar and wondering what's going to happen in the portal, Wednesday is the day to look at that. And here's another Texas question that I absolutely love. If you want to ensure that your question is asked, please send us a super chat. But this one is just to basically rile up Paul a little bit. Do we think KJ Lacey is going to be good as Trey Owens? If you could just go ahead and project that out, I would really appreciate it. And by the way, this is all binding. Yeah,
that's a great question, working man. What about Troy Hune?
Dude,
is he a sophomore?
Diabell.
That's right. So, God, throw that in. Who knows?
I like 2027 Peyton Houston. He's out of Shreveport. He plays baseball. Had a great Rivals camp this weekend. We can talk about 2027 quarterbacks if need. I can go that deep.
Son threw a touchdown last week in his flag football game. He's 10, so he's in the mix. He has my genetics, so he's pretty handicapped in this race. But it's a valid question.
Well, that question basically did exactly what I needed it to do and rile you up a little bit. Let's go back to David Keith Williams, who's asking, and this I think is more of a structural question to do with how we're going to be moving forward in terms of program building. The big sentiment, and I think you said this, Paul, in one of your articles, is you really kind of want between 70 and 80% high school, and then the rest of that is coming in each with the portal. But with the portal, with this carousel of players moving around, how important is a top 5 class? Is that the thing that was used to be the metric? That was the thing for Mac. He had to hang his hat on that. Where does this sit now in this new environment? How important is a top 5 class?
So it is important because you need to get all your D-line and O-line and predominantly from pure recruiting, and then fill in gaps from there. Probably you want to get your quarterback on the recruiting trail as well. Although last year, every elite quarterback was a transfer.
Yeah.
Fact. So other than Drake May. So, and he almost got
he committed to Alabama. So,
yeah. So, look, the bottom line is that it's what Justin said. It's the proof in the pudding. And what Ian said, you've got to demonstrate a track record of 1 or 2 year starters who stuck around and then got paid and hit the NFL. And they had that one big star show out year and then got snapped up. And I think Sark has done a pretty good job of balancing, hey, this is a good place to be. This is, this isn't all just business. You do have the potential to like hang out at a really cool university and get an education if you want. And there is a useful alum network, and you will meet and make connections that could help it, your entire life, enrich you, not just financially, but in other ways as well. And also, we're going to develop you. And also, you have to be able to talk frankly in a non-punitive way to people about their windows. Everyone comes in thinking, I'm going to do my 3 years, then I'm out, and then I'm going to be a multimillionaire. And it's like, hey, man, you're not that guy. Actually, you're not ready. And here's why. And you do it in a way that you've already built trust, and you have that discussion in a responsible way, and not just the idiot uncle who suddenly appears out of nowhere and has never played a down of football in his life. And, he's advising you about what you should be doing, and they're betraying you. You need to transfer. That's the stuff he's going to have to handle. Truth is, you'll know Texas has arrived when we have guys transferring out who become all conference and get drafted.
Right. And I think the thing that's going to be these little subtleties that are happening now. So again, Wednesday is when the transfer portal closes. SEC rules state that they are not allowed to transfer in conference. So kids that are leaving at this time, they're not going to be in the league next year. Now, who knows? I mean, the way it works, maybe in another year's time, they might be. But moving forward here, I just want to, will LSU, I mean, this is a question from Danny here, and I don't even know if we can get into this right now. How do we feel about Dominique Williams? I mean, obviously he's a player of massive interest moving forward, and LSU, we've got Bo Davis over there. Do we feel like we've still got a great chance on that? This is a story that Eric's been following for a very long time. He's in on this, but yeah. What are our thoughts here, Justin?
I'm the one talking to the guy. Yeah, they're announcing Wednesday.
Okay.
I like where Texas is at, but they aren't giving any hints. Right. And neither are the programs they're leaving. If anything, we're seeing OU make a massive push in the last 48 hours, including offering his little brother a scholarship. Not sure how that's going to go over. And then, pushing, everyone's following all their family on social media.
Right.
So I feel like OU is scrambling right now, whereas Texas is kind of sitting back, and I think they feel pretty good with their offer. I think they feel pretty good in their position. But D tackle market with portal in the post spring is wacky craziness right now. The market is jumping, as we've seen so far. And so the next 48 hours are going to be big. I know Texas feels good where they're at, but it's hard to handicap that right now. So with Dominique Williams, I don't think LSU is going to outbid anybody for a Texas target. That's my overall opinion. I don't see that happening. They haven't done it yet. And Texas has been very successful in the state of Louisiana the last 2 cycles, and I think they'll continue to be as well. But
Justin, what about Missouri? Because Missouri a couple times in the last year has thrown around some pretty stupid money.
They have, and it's actually worked. Getting a Luther Burden, which might be a future, that might be a first-round draft pick next year, actually, at receiver. And they added a couple edge and D linemen in this portal in the last, I think, 2 months, 3 months. Missouri's they're coming off a really good season, and they're trying to generate as much momentum as they can. And they're actually getting in on some of these recruitments. I think they're going to come up short on most of the 5 stars in your top 4-star guys. But Missouri's not playing around. Like they're all in. They're doing really well in the portal. You got to give them credit.
Hey, I do think Bo Davis can actually take an interesting angle. He's got to play it correctly, but he can take an interesting angle in this recruitment because he can say, I know that D tackle room. I coach them. Texas is bringing you in to rotate you. There's a bunch of really talented guys there.
You know what Texas counter can be? Bo, you didn't recruit any of them. You barely developed the ones that are still there, and the other ones already took off.
Well, but he could point to the draft and say, I made Byron Murphy. I made Murphy and Sweat, right? I mean, these guys don't – the recruits don't know. That's my point. They don't know this stuff, right?
Right.
So Bo Davis can point to Sweat and Murphy and say proof in the pudding. And then he can say, I know the guys. I coached the guys behind them. Texas wants to bring you on as a situational piece. True or not true, doesn't matter. That's what he can tell them. You're right. You're coming to LSU to start. You're not coming off the field because we have a gaping vacuum at defensive tackle if you watch the NFL draft and you watched LSU defense last year. So anyway, it's an interesting thing. He's got to play it just right because you could actually offend Dominic and be like, "Oh, you don't think I can start at Texas? Oh, interesting." So it's interesting. He has an interesting angle in this recruitment, but I don't think this will be determined by LSU outbidding us. I think Justin's exactly right.
LC, we should start a new segment called Paul Plays Chess Against Himself.
That's right.
There is that element, right? I mean, one of the keys in the success for both Sweat and Broughton were the idea that they did rotate, right? I mean, that rotation kept them healthy, kept them fresh throughout that. So, the other argument there could be made that is the style of play that is going to get you into the NFL where you're playing at a high level each time because you're fresh, because of those rotations. But again, your point is well taken. I do want to make a little comment just on the NIL in general, and specifically how Texas is running this. There is not an organization in the country that has figured this out better than Texas, just in terms of understanding value and understanding the marketplace. So if a player is coming in and they're saying, "Hey, we're worth X, Y, and Z," the people making the decision in those funds are well aware of the market. They understand what's going on, and they also know what they're willing to pay. So it may be an opportunity where this young man comes in and he can afford the opportunity to earn some more money somewhere else, but it won't be because Texas didn't give him a strong market value and what they believe that he's worth and how they can develop him. As we move forward here, again, we're going to close this out pretty soon, and we want to thank all the folks on Twitter and certainly Instagram, a few of those folks, and obviously YouTube for checking us out. Please check out InsideTexas.com. That's where all of these articles and these minds are living right now. If you use the promo code IT1, you will get 2 months of Inside Texas for $1. That's a deal that's a little bit tricky to beat at the moment. Is there anything that you're looking forward to this week, Paul, just in terms of, I know you and I talked prior to going live here about it, some articles that you were working on. Is there anything that you want to preview for the fine folks that might subscribe?
There's always good stuff in the works. There's 2 really good articles up right now breaking down the draft. And for a little parting gift for our Longhorns, it's not enough that we succeed. Also, our enemies must fail. So I also added the Texas A&M recruiting rankings from 2019 to 2022. And they are as follows. Number 4 in 2019 was their consensus finish. Number 6 in 2020. Number 8 in 2021. Number 1 in 2022. Justin, that 2022 class was the greatest recruiting class ever, with like 4 R's on the end of ever. And A&M went 7-6, and their winning record was abetted by home wins over Louisiana Monroe, New Mexico, and Abilene Christian. So this isn't just about recruiting. Recruiting is the first step in the developmental process. It is not as its own little unique unicorn that lives in its own little world. And I know there are recruiting people that care more about recruiting than the actual games, but the purpose of recruiting is to play the actual games. And so I think A&M is a good example of a product that focused more on the recruiting and the rankings rather than development, than fit, than modernizing offense, or not just hiring your buddy to coach the defense. So I think there's an object lesson there for Texas. And frankly, we lived some of that object lesson for the last decade, but we're out of those woods. I think everyone should be very excited about the future and the present of Texas football.
We had one question that gave us the opportunity to really wind up Paul, and I'd like to do the same for Ian right here. This is coming from Mr. Williams. The advantage that Coach Sark has over Coach Herman and Coach Strong and even Coach Brown is that Coach Sark has great position coaches. I mean, we're throwing Dwayne Akina out the window here, and
I was about to say, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't understand. This to me is, and again, he didn't get into coordinators. I think Ian's love for Greg Davis is well established. He's got his face on a couple.
Ian is the bridesmaid there. I'm the Greg guy.
Well, I understand.
They shared a bottle of wine with him at a wedding and had a blast.
You both have a picture of him on throw pillows strewn throughout the house. We understand that. So how do we feel about this? I mean, does Coach Sark have a distinct advantage when it comes to the position coaches? I mean, my 2 cents is I don't necessarily agree with the premise of that, but Ian, we'll throw this off to you.
I don't know if that's quite right, even for Herman. I think at a coordinator level, Sark has a big advantage. Mostly on defense, I would say. Staff management seems like more of a strength for Sark. I don't know if it was always just the guys hired by Herman so much as how the staff was managed. Because you would hear like he would bottleneck recruiting. He was poor at delegating. He just had just wasn't very good at getting the most out of his guys, whereas Sark has a better overall culture and skill for staff management, I think, and quality control over his hires.
I mean, do you see Sark hopping on the plane, maybe going to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and trying to get some offensive coordinators, maybe a line coach, just to sweeten the deal?
Now, Charlie is another story. Charlie was terrible at hiring people and managing them.
He hired 2 really good assistant coaches in 3 years. 2.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, people are trying to break it down like position level and all that. Leadership, I don't think people look. The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore because of a lack of leadership.
Yeah,
and people are like trying to point to like, well, this is the actual. No, they didn't have any leaders. They didn't have anyone who actually knew anything. They had all these credentials and no knowledge, which is an increasingly commonplace thing in our society, right? And they just didn't have leadership. Sark is incredibly comfortable in his own skin.
Yeah.
Tom Herman was not. And from that flows a lot of deficiencies and problems that aren't neatly summated by what happens on the whiteboard or X's and O's or recruiting. It's just leadership. And Sark is happy not to take the credit for anything, and he'll take the blame for everything. And that's a very refreshing thing that we haven't had at the University of Texas in quite some time.
Again, moving forward, we do the big thing to watch. We want everybody to pay attention to is obviously Wednesday. That's the deadline for folks to enter the portal. We've had a great time chatting with you. And the fact that we have over 3,000 people joining us on Twitter is a big deal. Obviously, the gentlemen have their handles under their names here if you want to check them out as well. But please check out InsideTexas.com. This will be my last little ad for us. It is a promo code IT1. Will get you 2 months of InsideTexas.com. Justin, anything to take the folks out?
Yes, we got to.